All right. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in to Fury of the Mad Monarch. This is Michael. Today on the show, we have Caine. Go ahead and introduce yourself.
Hello, I'm Caine, former uh, article maker, writer, I guess you could say, with the whole Gamergate situation. Now I am just sort of freelancing about. I am a therapist, social worker, mental health professional, and I am here to discuss Final Fantasy, uh, chiefly 10, but I guarantee you we're going to be going around the block today.
Indeed. I guess first we could probably start off I think we'll probably at least agree on this to an extent. For the actual combat system of Final Fantasy X, I thought it was very well made and handled.
Yeah, in fact, that's one of the things that I was playing it. I have posted this on Twitter and what have you, but that I'm actually a fan of Final Fantasy 13, and people will, I can hear the hissing from people who are just like, no, unclean. But it's a very fast, very action-oriented system, which I found had its own strengths. And then you go back and you play more the classics, which are the A2B system, and they feel completely different. And it actually took me a little bit to adjust to Final Fantasy X once again. But once I did, it was just you jump right in, and I found myself very quickly, trying to make strategic choices based upon the characters, and I really think it did a great job in promoting switching characters out, so that you're not just, hey, I like Tidus, Yuna, and Waka, and that's all I'm ever going to use. You could do that, but it's not as optimal as switching around and playing with different characters and running around the board, the sphere grid.
That sphere grid. I'll get to the sphere grid in a second. But we do kind of agree on the battle system, but I always felt with Final Fantasy X, more so than any other game in the franchise, it seriously is holding your hand so much the whole time. It says, you see these slimes? When you see them, bring out Lulu and hit him with magic. And that never varies from beginning to end of the game. They basically telegraph how to win every fight right off the back, draining any real challenge the system could have had.
Yeah, but here's the thing, and this is where I get in a disagreement with people who do play video games, gamers, whatever you want to call them. Um, I don't think every game has to be a challenge. I think some games just can be enjoyable, and that's good enough. I don't. Whenever I play Final Fantasy X, I kind of play it for the storyline, the characters, to get lost in the world, and stuff like that. I'm not really playing it to be challenged. If I wanted to be challenged, I've got a Steam with hundreds of games that I could plop on and get a challenge out of. I've got Dark Souls at 1 and 2. So whenever I play 10, 13, 6, any of them, I'm playing it more for the world, the story, the engagement than I am, oh, I want to be challenged or I want to show my skill at this. And that's a whole different discussion there. But I do it just to go, hey, I enjoy this.
I can definitely get behind that quite a bit, but the thing with Final Fantasy X is when there's no challenge to it either, and then that pretty much just leaves the characters, the world, the story, and 10 infuriates me just immediately out of the gate.
Well, why is that?
I don't like Titus, or Titus,
Yeah.
whatever way you want to pronounce it.
Uh-huh.
I think it's supposed to be Titus,
Yeah, it's Tidus.
but he never shuts up about it being his story yet. This entire story could be told with minimal change if you just cut him out of the script.
Now, see, I I don't hear that he's doing a lot of that. And I'm now at the Calmlands, which playing the living bejesus out of this game to sort of refresh myself. But he's only really done that in a few slots. At the beginning is notably one, this is my story. Then he says it in the beginning cutscene, this is my story. But then in the game, I don't see any of that, which is, so I have heard that criticism, oh, he's saying it's his story, he needs to shut up, stop being so annoying about it. But I don't hear it much, so I'm really interested that, other people are hearing that as a problem.
It might just be because it is multiple times it comes up, but it might just be exaggerated for most people because it's such a ridiculous thing for him to be saying or
Yeah.
to come up at all that the fact it happens more than once seems way too much.
Yeah, and I mean, with this is one of the things that I think that they sort of did with Tidus is you're expected that to be his because he's the main character. If you listen to some critics, the main character is the only one that matters. But as I'm playing it, it's becoming more and more obvious. It's not about Tidus, it's about Yuna, and it's about her sort of travel and her story, so to speak.
You see, I kind of wish they just let Yuna be the main character. Like, I'm not really fond of her as a character, but I don't dislike her or anything. She's more interesting than Tidus is, and it would make a lot more sense if she was the lead of the game.
Well, and I think she is. I just think that she's not the controlled character. And you'll actually, for me, as I'm playing it, I'm seeing that, for example, great. Whenever we were in Makalania Woods in that storyline after Surukidani, everyone gets mentioned by Yuna except for Tidus. I don't think you ever hear Tidus' name in the entire game, which is interesting. I don't know if that's because of the rename issue or what have you, but everybody else has their name.
Well, I remember, you could select your own name back on the PS2 version. I've not touched the HD remake at all. And they couldn't really adjust it to whatever name you put in.
Mm-hmm.
I think they just kept that over as, a carry-on from all the previous games where you could just name your characters. But they also wanted to include the voice acting.
Yeah, which, we'll get to that eventually, I'm pretty sure. And all good time, all good time. Yeah, I just sort of feel like it's not really Tidus. Like, Tidus is just there. Tidus exists to some degree for the story very briefly, just to sort of be... I almost feel like he's the narrator of the entire story. Like, he's not the actual subject of it all.
If I could describe what I think they were going for with Tidus, is he is the idiot there to ask questions because just to explain what's going on around you.
Maybe. And I mean, that's why. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Oh, I think there's so much in the Final Fantasy X world that no one's going to up and say what it is, because to everyone around you, it should seem just natural. Like, no one's going to be asking questions.
Yeah.
So you as the player are just kind of looking at this like, what am I seeing?
Right.
Tidus is there to ask the stupid questions you can't ask.
True, and that's why I sort of put him to me, he's an active narrator. He's in the story. He exists. He's not ignored or overlooked, but at the same time, I mean, his story function is minimal outside of having a romantic interest in Yuna, the second half of the game, so to speak.
Yeah, I didn't buy that romance in the slightest. It felt so unnatural.
I think it came out of the blue. It could have been a good romance, but it was just sort of, you're always throwing yourself at monsters for me. I love you. Really? I mean, I'm not quite sure that's how love works, but okay. I mean, but at the same time, I mean, let's be realistic. In video games, I don't think I've yet to see a really good love story that's just got all the elements and it tells the love story well.
I think there's been some that have done a pretty good job, but nothing amazing.
Yeah. And I think one of the things, especially with Final Fantasy, that a lot of people overlook is it is Japanese. And the culture of the Japanese storytelling and the structure of the Japanese storytelling is going to be fundamentally different than the structure of American storytelling.
Yeah. I wouldn't think the structure itself would be too much different because you see similar structures in like movies that come over from there. But that's really like the basis of levels, like how you'll have your start. Wow, I am trying to remember what all the words I'm trying to think of are. I wasn't expecting to come in with like narrative structure discussion.
Language is hard. No. Well, I mean, you have sort of it's in the end you can. I don't even think it fits the hero monomyth. I'm trying to. I mean, okay. So let's back it up. Let's talk about first the story of Final Fantasy X. Let's start there. Give us some, its own structure and discussion here. So the story of Final Fantasy X, for anybody who has forgotten, is simply, Tidus drops into the world of Spira, not Spira, and is kind of found by Waka and eventually becomes a guardian to Yuna. They travel together, fall in love. Eventually, Tidus, he's all about, let's get back to Zanarkand. I want to go back home. But in the process of doing that, he discovers actually that for him to go home, Yuna has to die. Is what he originally finds out. And then he eventually finds out there's no home at all. That there's actually no home, that he is sort of a creation in and of himself, which, we'll probably get into more depth in a bit.
The dream thing.
The dream, yeah. But, I mean, the whole premise there being, that Tidus comes from, starting out as a spoiled, whiny baby, a character who's just concerned about himself and going home, to a richer, deeper character who learns to care for others and sort of finds his own bravery. But then, each of the main characters themselves also come to sort of their own things. But to me, it's not really as lazily handled as, let's say, 13 was. Because 13 was, here's Saz's story, and here's Vanille's story. And those two kind of intersect, but not really. And then here's their own resolutions. Whereas Final Fantasy X, everybody's story is linked together, which I think they did a real good job in. So I guess we'll start there. The story. What did you think of the story?
Well, like, on note of like Tidus being the whole dream creation, like just ignoring any kind of weird logic you would have to employ on this, like, we know he came from Dreams Anarchan, and we know Jecht came from Dreams Anarchan.
Mm-hmm.
They brought Jecht out. He failed, and their plan was, let's try this again. Or at least Orin's plan was that.
Well, okay, so now I'm gonna have to get into it because, like I said, just started, going through it all over again. Braska didn't fail, or Braska. I think is
Braska was Yuna's father, I believe.
Yuna's father,
Yeah.
Braska, didn't actually fail. He actually succeeded. He defeated Sin. So, P.S. You're getting all kinds of spoilers if you're watching this, and if you haven't played it, it's your own fault at this point. So, I think the game's over a decade old. Go play it.
Yeah.
So, he doesn't actually fail. He succeeds. But during all of this,
I'm meaning more Jecht and the freaking dreaming people failed in permanently stopping Sin. Not so much Braska.
Oh, okay. Well, I have to wonder if the Faith ever intended to stop it, or if they were just enacting the cycle in and of themselves, because the whole thing is simply a cycle of life, death, and rebirth. It's a very classic nature story. We have it ourselves. What is fall? What is spring? What is summer? It's a death cycle, and they actually discuss it within the game that Spira's problem is that Spira is about death. It is a spiral of death, and everything is occurring around that sort of spiral of death, and colluding in some sort of a way to almost bring everybody to death. And when you think about it, I think in that context of the story, Final Fantasy X becomes a lot more rich because it's no longer, Tidus being whiny and the characters, but it's about the world that was created. That if you play the game and you really pay attention to it, the world of Spira is a lie. It's actually a very, very well executed lie. Everybody is in colorful clothes. Everybody is out playing sports and having fun. Everybody is going along their way, but every single one of them is lost in a depression because every single one of them knows at any second they could die because of sin. And that's actually, and that brings us, I think, full circle very quickly to the laughing scene that everybody hates. Because that scene, the entire point of that scene was to say Yuna is depressed. That Yuna is actually clinically depressed because she sees no hope. So all she has to do is deny that this is going on, just laugh. And then once she realizes it's actually going to happen, once she gets to Bavel and all of this with Seymour happens and she realizes that the church has betrayed the faith, she has to come to the reality that she's going to die, that there's no hope for her, and that this is the system that was put into place for her. And I think that's a very powerful moment for a character. And I think for me, when I was playing the game, when I realized it for Yuna, was in Bavel whenever she stepped up to that edge. And she said, if you don't let them go, I'm going to kill myself. And in that moment, you sort of, for me, that's when Yuna realizes that maybe the world isn't what she was pretending it was going to be. And for this and like many other reasons, I think Final Fantasy X is an incredibly rich game for a narrative because you have so many different layers with the Yevon faith and Yu Yevon himself, with Bavel and faith system and the failure of the faith system, and death is a cycle, and so many other neat things.
In terms of the laughing scene, like, I see what you're saying on it, but you didn't need, like, the horrible ear-piercing laugh of Tidus to get that point across. That's what I'm pretty sure most people hate about that scene, is that just makes you want to strangle him.
Yeah, well, and I think one of the things that gets lost in all of that, I mean, don't get me wrong, that scene, it still makes me cringe. I watched it, I still cringed. I'm just like, holy crap, you did, no, just, no. But when we think about it, I don't know, I'm not exactly the best when it comes to the history of video games and whatnot, but I think, wasn't voice acting pretty young at that point? Because I think Final Fantasy IX didn't have voice acting. So for the Final Fantasy series, that's the first voice acted game.
For the most part, I think the voice acting was not that bad. It was just Tidus, really, that I hated.
Mm-hmm. And I think, and I agree with you on that, because Tidus gets on my nerves. Whoever, I don't know the voice actor's name, but I really do believe that voice actor, I can't help but wonder if they got bad directions or if they're just not that good of a voice actor. But I feel like they played Tidus much too blandly. Like, I have a feeling that he was supposed to be a lot more personality and richness in his character than just, I love you now.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised. I'm actually pulling him, like, the IMDb for Final Fantasy X up real fast.
Mm-hmm.
I am seeing if this guy's done any work prior to this. Let's see, 2001. Oh God, he has done a lot of work since then.
Well, so maybe he just got some bad direction. I don't. I want to think he's a good voice actor, but Tidus, I mean, he really was. But with that said,
he was in Johnny Bravo.
Well, with that said, though, I do want to say on a side note, Lulu's voice actress, amazing. Um, Riku, amazing. We all know, Waka. Joe DiMaggio, great. Really brought the character of Waka to life. Um, God, Yuna, I mean, her voice actress showed a lot of range and talent, going from this blank personality slate of I've got to keep happy because everyone expects me to be happy, to being angry at some points and showing that through her voice. But at the same time, yes, she was also part of the laughing scene, which was also part of the problem.
Yeah. But yeah, as you were saying though, like about like all the overarching themes of Final Fantasy X, like these were all great ideas to try to employ. But for me, the problem kind of came up in like the first 30 minutes to an hour of going to Spira or exiting Dreams Anarchind, I guess.
Hmm.
Every one of these themes becomes so immediately apparent. 'Cause you have Titus just looks around and goes, "What's wrong with you people?"
Yeah.
Basically. So it kind of spells all of this out immediately.
So you wanted more of sort of an exploration of that versus okay, everyone's depressed. Okay, everyone's got this problem.
Yeah, because I got that right off the back, and that just
Okay.
left me going through the rest of the game with nothing else to really latch onto in
Okay.
terms of like the plot and theme building.
See, and it makes me wonder maybe if the developers just kind of went, okay, they're not going to get it, so let's hammer it over their head. Me personally, I thought it was very well implemented. That they discussed it and the themes were there, and even though they become apparent, they're still important, and you don't lose that fact. So I think it still works, even if maybe it is obvious, and they flat out say it. They're like, "Spirit is a cycle of death."
They could probably use with slightly less obvious language like that too, but
Yeah, and
that's
they,
just nitpicking.
yeah, I maybe it's the Japanese expectation of the American intellect. Who knows? Just going to throw that one out there for you.
Well, they released the game to themselves first.
Nah, true. But localization, we always have to keep in mind there is localization, so they may
Yeah.
have, you know, in the process of the localization, some things got lost, like subtlety.
Yeah, they might have tried to go for a slightly more direct translation on some of these things, which I wish they would stop doing so much. Like, what was it back with Final Fantasy VI? Like, you had Terra, whose name in Japan was Tina,
Hmm.
but that got changed to Terra because, well, to Japan, Tina sounds like an exotic name. They just brought that name over directly, it'd have lost all impact it was supposed to have.
Yeah, but Tara was a good name to throw. Yeah,
Oh, it
so there's
was.
that. Yeah,
I love Terra. She was awesome.
yeah, it's a much cooler name than Tina, I've got to say. Um, Also, I think talking about Final Fantasy X, uh, the death motif, I really liked that. I know that's you said it was sort of ham-fisted, but I thought it was a really good theme that just went through the entire game. Life, death, birth, and death, existence, rebirth, and how really the only constant when you think about it in the world of Spira is death, is sin. That's the only constant. There's nothing else that's been constant in these people's lives, not even Bavel and Xanarkin, because, well, yeah, but Xanarkin was destroyed, Bavel has changed over time. So really all that was left for them over time was Xanarkin. I'm sorry, not is sin. And that's really all they got to know, and their lives started to revolve around sin. Uh, their entire existence revolved around sin. And when you think about that, the idea of your entire existence and being your cultures, your rituals all revolve around the one thing that's going to destroy all of you at any given time. Yeah, I thought that's interesting to me because you don't really see a lot of that in games, and I felt that was a very mature approach to it.
I can agree with that, but I kind of end up with like these weird problems trying to reconcile that with what's actually happening in game. What I refer to is, why are they building their towns on the coastline? I
Well,
mean,
because everywhere's a coastline almost.
there's quite a few more inward areas they could be building, though. Like, if you see some of the big overworld maps, they're not completely relegated to the coast. Like, and I know moving inland isn't going to completely clear the problem, because, you know, we can still launch those seed things.
And he can fly.
I don't remember Sin flying at any point.
At the very end of the game, whenever you go into the airship and you fight him, you
Oh,
break off
yeah.
pieces of armor so you can get inside. Sin can fly. Point to me.
Why hasn't he been seen flying prior to that, though? Like, is this common knowledge Sin can fly?
I would think so. I mean, he flies in Zanarkand.
I don't remember that. Like, I just remember him being in the water the entire game.
Yeah, and there's also there's a theory, so to speak, of Dream Zanarkand. That Dream Zanarkand is actually summoned by the Faith, and it's in the sky in an unknown location, and that's how Sin got to it. Yeah, I think that's a stupid theory. I think for the Ultimania, I'm like, really? It's hidden in the sky. Really? It came from an Ultimania, and those are just shit. But,
Oh, wow,
yes.
that's beautiful.
Yeah, I'm personally just a fan of the idea that Dream Zanarkand is just either an alternate universe, it's just, you know, not here, it's somewhere else, and that Sin somehow moves between universes. But
You know, this is one of those things I'm okay just going with what they tell you. Pulled from
True.
the Dream of the Faith.
Yeah. Which, as a side note, and this is, I was just talking with someone about this last night. Did you notice everybody can breathe underwater for an infinite amount of time in Final Fantasy X?
Isn't it just the people who have those weird water-breathing things?
I did not see any water-breathing things the entire time I've been playing it, and I'm going. Here's why I bring it up. I oddly accept that they're doing this. Like, I have no problem that they're doing this. I shouldn't, but I'm just like, yeah, they can all breathe underwater. It's okay.
I'm sure. I think somewhere it was mentioned like all the Blitzball players use something to breathe, and then Riku has her deep diving stuff, which is why it's just her, Titus, and Waka that
Oh, okay.
do the underwater fights, because you can't bring anyone else down there with you.
Right. It was still kind of weird. I'm just going like, and this is, to me, it was weird because I'm accepting this is happening. I have no problem that everybody can do this, and it was, to me, so interesting that I can completely suspend any and all disbelief that they're doing this and be like, nah, it's not a problem. How can I do that? That's weird.
It's just years of playing video games, I guess.
Yeah, and you're just like, oh yeah, it's okay, they can do it.
I mean, back in Castlevania, you'd, eat chickens you found in century-old walls?
Yeah, makes no sense, but somehow we suspend our disbelief, and we're like, yeah, it could happen. No, it couldn't.
I still have a hard time accepting the volleyball as a weapon. Like, I know it's a blitzball, but no, you're hitting people with a volleyball.
Yeah, but it has spikes on it.
You know, this is kind of not helping your point, because you still got to hold the thing.
True, and that's, I was just finishing in the Calmlands, and I had what's it called when you counterattack? What's it called when you counterattack? Counterattack. I have the counterattack weapon on Waka, and I'm going, I was holding that thing, but I accept it. Like, it's not, it doesn't disturb me enough that I completely pop out of the game, but it's just enough that I'm going, how does he do that? And then I go, okay, yeah, I'll keep playing.
Like, the freaking blitzball doesn't bother me as much as Final Fantasy VIII's Gunblade.
It was a cool design, though, but it makes no sense whatsoever.
Like, I can even accept Cloud's Buster Sword without problem, but the Gunblade...
Yeah, it's like Gunblade, no, that's just... And then hit the trigger and you reverb, and that's somehow a powerful weapon? Okay.
No, I can buy the vibration things. I'm not buying the pistol grip on a sword.
But like I said, I give them credit. That was a pretty cool design.
I couldn't get into the design of that thing.
Let's see. Oh, and one thing I also think is real interesting, and this is sort of going to Final Fantasy 13. Um, Final Fantasy games, if you actually sit and you look at them as Final Fantasy games, not as your expectation of Final Fantasy games, they are really high quality games. When you just play them and go play, uh, shit, go play some other game that's not high quality. I don't know. And it's actually a very high quality series. But there's little bitty things here and there. We're like, oh, that could have been better because we expect better from Final Fantasy as a series.
I'd like to think, to an extent, I'm judging these games like on their own merits, but that's definitely going to color my view to an extent.
Well, yeah, I mean, the fact that it is Final Fantasy, you're going to expect beautiful graphics, which Final Fantasy X was gorgeous for its age, and it's still gorgeous. Like, I'm playing the HD version, and I'm still going, this is pretty.
Oh yeah, I may not like the game, but it looks wonderful.
And it's got, even though it beats you over the head, I don't agree that it does. I think it doesn't, it's not overt, but it's not, very subtle with the whole everything in Spira is a lie. That, the light clothing is just a way for them to hide that they're grieving. That still makes for a gorgeous world and a gorgeous storytelling because that builds the world versus, if you go out, let's say, for example, in Skyrim, and all you've got is everybody's in leather armor and you're kind of going, that builds a world to me. The clothing builds a Final Fantasy world.
I hadn't thought about that point before, but I can see it.
Yeah, I mean, just take, for example, Final Fantasy X and X-2's Yuna. Completely different Yunas. Different clothing. In fact, Yuna has a few clothing items. And dress spheres. But somehow, I mean, that builds the world, and it builds your investment in that world and your attention to that world in ways that I think that had it not been there, had it all just been, drab and dark and dreary and what have you, you would have been like, meh, I'm over this.
Oh yeah.
Let's see. We talked about story and characters. A little bit of graphics. I mean, anybody who disagrees that Final Fantasy X was pretty can just suck it.
Indeed. There were some weird design choices in like the character designs, like all the belts.
I loved Lulu. I'm sorry.
I like her design. I just don't get the belts.
Okay, and here's the story of the belts. Apparently, the designer, I think it was Nomura, wanted to troll the game designers. He was pissed at them, so he's like, you know what, put a shitload of belts on her, because they would have to go in and put each one of those belts in and make them different. It would take a shitload of time. He did it to piss off the people who were coding. And once you learn that, you're like, oh, I love that belt. Like, put on more belts.
That's one of those things, I don't know if that's true, but I want it to be.
Yeah, and that's, I mean, and another kind of side little anecdote that I've heard is that Final Fantasy X was actually created, the producer or writer, or someone who is high up in the development, when they created the game, they had actually come off of losing their father, and were still mourning, so that's why Final Fantasy X is so full of death themes, is because it was somebody's catharsis in dealing with the death of their parent.
Interesting.
Now where the whole summoner thing and all that comes from, who knows? Which is another thing. I thought that Yuna, the way that they presented the summoner in 10 was amazing, because before the classes, it didn't really matter, but the classes were the people were the classes, and it worked. Instead of Rydia is a summoner and Sissel is a paladin, Caine is a dragoon. It was Yuna is a summoner, and that's something in society. So that the role of Yuna not only became her class, but it became her role within society. Waka was a ranger, so to speak,
I
and that
guess we
spoke
can
of.
call him a ranger.
I mean, that's a close enough term for him. But that was his station, and I thought that was kind of neat too. I thought Final Fantasy X did a really great world building operation. It built a really rich world. Spear is a really rich world versus, let's say, I know I'm going to get some flack for this, but Final Fantasy XII's Ivalice, I was just like, I don't care, but Tactics Ivalice was great because it actually built a strong world. And I thought 10, Spira was a very strong, very rich world where you can actually probably create an open-ended game in Spira and spend forever just exploring that versus, Ivalice in 12.
12, I have mixed feelings on. It had so much potential, but just got so boring so fast.
I term it was, my problem with it is because it was a video game about the Iraq War. And I just sort of went, oh, well, I'm not really interested. I can turn on TV and watch the war. I don't need to turn on my video games and watch the war. And it just felt, ham-fisted, so to speak.
Huh. I never drew any kind of Iraq War parallel with Final Fantasy 12.
And I don't know why I did, but I was just went, meh, I don't really want to play this game. And it is the only, to date, Final Fantasy 12 is the only Final Fantasy I have not finished.
I've not managed to slog through it either.
Just, I can't do it. And I guess since we're sort of in the general Final Fantasy area, let's just talk about general Final Fantasies.
Well, one last thing on 10 first. I just
Okay.
remembered I mentioned the sphere grid a while back.
Oh,
We haven't
yes.
actually gotten to that.
You go first.
All right. In premise, the sphere grid is a great idea with all the different paths. But once you start playing the game, it's not long before you realize every character is on their own path from the beginning, basically until they finish it. It's not until you start to get to all the post-game stuff any of that matters. So it creates like an illusion of choice when you're leveling up, and it just kind of adds this little layer of busy work, making you go in, select the spheres, use the grid, when an automated system is going to do the exact same thing anyway.
Okay, so here's where our big disagreement is, because I loved it. I think it was probably the best character progression to date. And yes, I mean current Final Fantasies as well. It was just a really great way to kind of give players, even if it's an illusion, a sense of choice. And then once you get to the end game, you kind of feel like, oh my gosh, there's even more here. Like I've got even more choices, more ideas, more things I can do with this. And it feels like it's a lot more where leveling mattered in Final Fantasy X versus let's say 4. My favorite Final Fantasy is to date is 4, but 4 leveling didn't feel like it mattered. You just you just kept going, and I think some of that is to do with the equipment. The equipment of 10 required there to be a little something different. Because if there wasn't, you were pretty much screwed with the equipment system. So I guess I could see I think sometimes it seems tacked on because I think it's a response to the equipment system. But I thought it was good. I thought it's a great progression system, and I feel playing it over again that it definitely actually gives me choice, because right now I think my Kimari is everything. He's got some white magic, black magic. He has a little bit of Auron stuff. But,
isn't he the weird one that ends up in like the middle of every possible path?
Yeah, and because he's a blue mage archetype, so Kimari may actually supposed to be that way, versus others who may not represent that. But I do notice that I can branch off a little bit. Sort of my Riku and Oron bumped into each other, and then they split off each other, and my Oron went to my Riku's path, and my Riku went to Oron's path, which is weird because Riku shouldn't be Oron, Riku should be Tidus. So I'm not quite sure how that happened, but it's interesting because I guarantee if I play again, Riku's not going to end up in that location. She's going to end up somewhere else. So that's why I think the Sphere Grid was great, especially if you do get the unlocks. I think if you don't get the unlocks, though, yeah, you're really stuck on one path until you can actually start unlocking stuff.
Yeah, with having a lot of the options for Final Fantasy X basically involve like holding off your leveling until you get to certain points.
Yeah.
To kind of optimize on different path options and variety.
Yeah.
The problem is when you look at the game's difficulty, there's no point in doing any of that. So it's additional work for no real added benefit.
And one of the side notes is, again, I'm playing the HD version. The HD version may actually be different than the release. I've not noticed any differences. It's been pretty easy up until I got to Bavel, and then it pretty much all just went to shit. And I'm in the Calmlands now, and I very much remember I had to grind through the Calmlands. So yeah.
It's always kind of difficult to talk about a game's difficulty, though. Like, my first Final Fantasy was 4 back on the Super Nintendo. So that's where my difficulty curve started. And out of all of the numbered entries, 4 was probably the hardest.
I can't remember. There was one that was hard mode.
Well,
like in Final Fantasy IV, was it the SNES was hard version? I can't remember.
There was the hard mode. They did an easy version. We kind of got a weird one in between when it came out here.
Okay.
The DS is actually, I think, the hardest version if you've played that one.
I have. A little bit. I've got it on my iPad. But,
I was so sad I got my ass kicked by Scarmiglian. The first fiend whooped me. I was like, are you kidding me?
Yeah, I was about to say, no, it was... But yeah, it was Scarmiglian. It wasn't Cagnazzo. The Fiend of the Sea. Oy vey. And this is why I really like the Final Fantasy series. I know a lot of people give Final Fantasy shit because it does this, that, or the other. But it's a classic series. It really is. It's a really awesome series that I think does a lot more right than it does wrong. Especially given you can download RPG Maker and go to town. I think it really it's still to this day, Final Fantasy, the series sets itself apart from any other RPG.
Indeed. Even with the Final Fantasy 13 series missteps, I feel.
Yeah, we're going to have to visit that one.
Oh,
I love 13. Yes, I'm one of those odd people that actually likes 13.
Like, I feel like I should hate it. Like, I don't like it. But I just can't bring myself to hate it.
Yeah, so... I'm trying. Do we want to actually go through Final Fantasies?
We might as well.
Yeah, I was about to say. I mean,
we basically covered the major points of 10.
Yeah.
Anything else would be like nitpicking minor points.
And I think, in all honesty, 10 was more popular than unpopular. Now, when we get into some of the other ones, we'll be like, "No, you're wrong," and you're going to hell for it. So, 1 through 3. I mean, those were pretty. Those were what they were.
I wish I could enjoy Final Fantasy 1. Like, I finally got the chance to play it quite a few years back. Like, I'd already played 4 and 6.
Yeah.
So I get a hold of Final Fantasy 1. I start playing. It's very well made, but it feels so archaic.
Well, yeah, and I think that's always going to be sort of the pitfall of going back and playing games. That's why whenever... I started playing 10. I was like, I got the HD version. This will be a lot better than, playing the old version. And it is. Yeah, and I've played one. I've gone back and played one, and I definitely see that. Yeah, it didn't age particularly well, but we're also talking about NES.
I I can't do any of the NES ones. Like I think 2 is a legitimately bad game. Like the actual 2.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
They just start introducing and murdering so many characters before you really get any chance to know any of them.
Look, it's a new. Oh, you're dead.
There was the leveling system.
Yeah, because isn't that the one that it leveled based upon what you used?
Kind of. Alright, from what I've been able to gather, is this is the best explanation is there's like an invisible gauge that's building up as you fight.
Mm-hmm.
Like your attacks will cause it to fill, getting hit, dodging, casting a spell. Whatever the last thing to happen to you when this invisible gauge fills is depends on what the stat boost is. Like
Ah,
not necessarily what you've been doing the whole time. Like if you've just been, yeah, I'm just gonna take hits, make this guy a tank. You get hit, you get hit, you get hit,
yeah,
and then
no.
you manage to dodge that last one by fluke. It's your evasion that goes up, not your defense.
No, yeah, that's not okay. That's not okay at all.
At least that's what I'm gathering. I don't know if anyone's really figured it out.
It does something. Who knows? Um, but yeah, I think 1 through 3. I mean, I haven't played a whole bunch of them. I have played them, but they're not remarkable enough to remember. So I just sort of go, yeah, I played them.
3 is at the distinct disadvantage of being a prototype for what became 5. So
Yeah.
if you played 5 first, you're literally just playing a downgraded version of the actual battle system,
Mm-hmm.
and the series still hadn't quite hit its stride of telling good stories yet.
Yeah. Well, 5 we'll get to. 5 wasn't too bad. So
Yeah.
let's start. Let's go with 4 then. Final
Oh,
Fantasy 4.
I even love that awful, terrible translation it got back on the Super.
Oh yes, when Rosa was about to be squished by a ball.
Or the just random guy going, "Do you have an ogreish one?" with no follow up.
And it's just like, yeah, do you have one? Oh. Yeah. But I mean, 4 was a classic. I
Oh,
think. Great characters, great storyline, great world. Even though, I mean, was there even a world name?
I don't
No.
think the world was given a name.
Yeah. I just think it just sort of is what it is. I think that one's very much a character narrative story.
Yeah,
Like you're supposed to care more about the characters than you are about what world they're in.
indeed. Like, wasn't like 9 the first one that actually started naming worlds, or at least made note of the world's name?
I'm trying to think if
7 just referred to it as the planet the whole time.
yeah, I think so. I was about to say I don't remember 6 doing it. I can't remember if 5 did or not. So maybe.
5 was just like weird dimensions thing.
Yeah. Yeah. That was yeah.
But yeah, 4
And then
stands as one of my favorites of the series.
yeah, for me too. I mean, it's it was my first. I think everyone remembers their first Final Fantasy.
Oh yes.
Accordingly, we may need lives that we remember our first Final Fantasy in our childhood. Um, and so 5. Uh,
5, the villain was a tree.
the villain was Exdeath. Yeah. Which 4? Oh, 4 storyline. I got so tired of Caine betraying everybody.
Yes.
I was just like, Caine, please just pick a side. I mean,
Okay. Did you play the After Years?
um, I don't think I have. I think it's on my list.
Yeah, that's basically in the beginning of his bit. He's against you again. They can't seem to get over this aspect of him. He always has to be against you at some point.
Yeah, oh Lord. Oh, Caine.
I do like Caine, but that got old.
Yeah, and then trying to push him and make him a better character than he is. I mean, he was kind of boring. So,
I
just,
preferred
yeah,
Cecil and Rydia and Edge.
I just preferred Rydia. So,
Rydia was awesome.
yeah, she was just pretty much the best that there ever was. And then, see. Yeah, I mean, the storyline was very classic. I mean, it was just to go from point A to point B and do good in the world and try not to die.
There's kind of that weird out of nowhere you're an alien thing, but
Yeah,
not completely out of nowhere, but
it was pretty much not here where.
you just kind of show up, you go to the moon, and there's a guy with an epic beard there.
And he's like, "Oh, hey, I'm your grandpa." And it's like, what? What? Yeah, that was special.
I don't get Zermus either. Like, you go, you see Zemus, they whip out the crystal, they beat Zemus, you're like, oh, you weren't really necessary, and then he revives on hate.
Yeah, it's like, what do you hate? I don't. Is it McDonald's? I mean, we all hate McDonald's. Does that mean we're all gonna be born again?
I used to work at McDonald's.
It's just, I didn't quite get that either. But I was like, okay, well. And then of course that fight was incredibly fucking hard.
You know, it's not so bad once you realize what the trick was. You notice how much he spams that Big Bang attack?
Uh-huh.
I found out why he does that. It's a counter.
Oh, for an attack?
Big Bang is acting as a counter.
Hmm.
Here's what you do to make that fight easy is you let Caine stay dead. He's worthless in this fight.
Yeah.
Really, even Edge is kind of worthless in this fight.
It's pretty much just Rydia. We're just going to just put it out there. It's Rydia. Rydia's number one.
Drop Bahamut.
Yeah.
Heal and make sure your Caine or not Caine, Cecil and Rosa are keeping your party healed whenever Big Bang hits. Really, Cecil's not doing much healing because his magic is terrible.
Yeah.
So if you just do nothing but attack with Rydia and use the other two to heal and let the other two die, the fight's not that bad.
Which, another thing, this will be another little Final Fantasy kind of geek moment. Do you say Bahamut or Bahamut?
I say Bahamut because that is right. I don't care what the official people say. Bahamut sounds so stupid.
It sounds silly, but it's apparently the correct way. Oh no. Dun dun dun.
It sounds so dumb.
Yeah, it's because it's, rooted in mythology, etc., etc. Yeah.
That I always used to pronounce the Chocobos or I'd say Chocobos as Cocobos. I'm trying to remember which one it actually is now.
I'm sitting. Did Adam Sessler raise them? That's inappropriate. But true.
That one took a second.
It's like, you'll get it. You'll get there. There you go. There you go. But yeah, so 4 was great. I think it was kind of the beginning of all of our childhoods, so to speak.
Yeah. Now, I really like 5, and I'd kind of rate it on the lower end of Final Fantasies I enjoy, though.
Mm-hmm.
However, I think what Square needs to do is make another game like Final Fantasy V. Just that more light-hearted tone.
Yeah.
They seem to have forgotten that in its entirety at this point.
Well, I mean, 13, 12, 10, 9, I think, was kind of the last one, where they were really kind of a lighthearted, jokey kind of a game.
I think 9 mixed it up a lot more, but
Yeah.
we'll get to 9. We seem to be going through them in order so far.
Yeah. For 5, we kind of did 5. I thought 5, its best shiny moment was the class system.
Yes.
being able to choose your classes and whatnot. Which is a side note, if you've never played it, Final Fantasy Dimensions has the same thing, and it's a long and boring game.
I bought it for my iPhone. It's the only game I bought for my iPhone, and I wish it was not on an iPhone.
Yeah, I played it on iPad, and dear God, it just because each time you go to each place, it's the same story. It's like, okay, you go, you meet a person who is this class, you talk with them, you learn to like them. Over time, you become allies, and then they die, and then you earn their class.
Yeah. I don't think that's what dragged the game down most. I mean, it certainly didn't help the process any.
Yeah.
It's the fact you have two separate parties with basically the same list of class options.
Mm-hmm.
Like, let's regrind the same party 2 different times.
Yeah. No.
That's what killed it for me.
Yeah, and then you get everyone together, and it's like, oh, okay, you can. And Dimensions was crap.
I never got everybody together. I couldn't make it that far.
I beat the game. Oy vey. That's just all I got for you on that. It was not a good ending. It just don't do it.
There was something in that game, though, with you playing as like the Warriors of Light and Dark and the Split World. They had something.
And it's gone.
Oh, that's the case of every Final Fantasy I don't like, I think. Is I just see there's something there.
And gone. So really, I think 5, and then of course it gave us the best representation for Gilgamesh.
Yes.
Yeah. So that's, I guess, one of the good things it gave us was Gilgamesh. 4, Rydia. That's all I'm saying. Like in my opinion, the most badass woman in Final Fantasy.
She's up there.
She's a badass because not only she dies like 5 times, and she keeps coming back, and each time she's like, still gonna kick your ass, still gonna kick your ass. What you gonna do? Still gonna kick your ass, and she kicks people's ass. Like she lives up to her ass kicking.
Indeed.
So, Rydia is the best. 6.
I love Final Fantasy VI.
And that's really, I mean, you just gotta be like, Final Fantasy VI next.
Yeah. No, I will say this, like, as much as I love it, it started, like, over the next couple of games, the worst trend of the series for me. Like, it wasn't as bad in 6, but it was, with their Esper system, they had the per-level stat bonuses.
Yeah.
Like, by the time you hit end game, if you take that into account, you can pretty much make any one of your characters any kind of person you want. Like, ooh, we have Sabin here, the monk. He punches things and suplex trains.
Yeah.
He's a caster now?
Yeah, I do like the option of changing characters because, I'm a fan of the red mage idea of having, a character you can turn into just an ass-kicking red mage. But every once in a while, just kind of go, okay, why not have a character that's just a summoner like Yuna?
Yeah.
That's okay.
Yeah. Like, I didn't mind when Final Fantasy V did this because, well, that was at the core of the system, was the power from the crystals that they granted you, yada yada.
Yeah.
Final Fantasy VI had characters with, like, very specific roles in the world, things they'd done.
Yeah.
So, I don't mind customizability and variance in this, but I want what you can do to them to make sense.
Yeah.
I don't want, like, my big muscle suplexing guy to now be a magician because, well, that's a very efficient way to build him, or anybody for that matter.
Yeah, because, everybody using Ultima.
Indeed.
But
that's the trend I hated that that game started because it got worse in 7.
Yeah, especially on where we get to 7, there's going to probably be a battle. People are going to be like, "Oh my god!"
I don't mind 7.
6 was I mean, it was a lot of people's first Final Fantasy, and and it's good. Like, I mean, I think it goes without saying that Final Fantasy VI is probably one of the gems of the series,
Oh
uh,
yeah.
because it tells a classic and epic story. And has a very memorable villain, a very memorable cast of characters who you kind of identify with and, in a sense, grow with, and which is really kind of an awesome thing. I think it was just a very good game all around. It had good battle system, good characters, good story, uh, good art, good sprites. It just
And
what
you
is
know
it
you can suplex a train.
you can suplex a train, and that's all you need in life, really. So if you want anything else, you're just gonna have to go somewhere. um, and yeah, I don't think anyone who can say anything bad about Final Fantasy VI is probably a horrible human being.
All right, with like Final Fantasy VI, like,
Yeah.
well, basically for me, just in terms of gaming in general. Are you still there?
Yeah, I'm scraping on a canvas. I'm
Oh,
trying not to.
okay.
Yeah.
Okay, I just heard the background noise cut out and thought you might have dropped, but like for me, like my earliest memory just in life is getting a Super Nintendo with Super Mario World. Shortly after that, it was like my half brother would come to visit from time to time, and he'd bring his copy of Final Fantasy IV. And
Yeah.
then I would get Final Fantasy VI or 3 at the time from like the local video shop, which I don't understand how this like middle of nowhere town had the greatest selection of video games at the mom and pop rental shop.
Mm-hmm.
But I'd get Final Fantasy VI, and like for me, when I finally invested the time into that game myself, like normally I'd play through with my brothers for some games, but when I'd sit down and actually play through 6 by myself, just focusing solely on the game, that's kind of the game that really made me start to look at and examine the games I was playing a lot closer.
Yeah.
Like, helped me appreciate even games I played before so much more because I got so invested in what was happening. I start to pick up on all like the little subtleties, the details. So that has a huge nostalgia bonus for me,
Yeah.
regardless of how awesome of a game it is.
And I mean, Final Fantasy VI had one of the. Final Fantasy IV was very mature in that its character deaths, more final. They weren't just offshoot characters. They were major to the party at one point or another. Um, Final Fantasy VI had probably one of the most. I don't want to say original because it really wasn't original. Uh, Gut wrenching moments when Celeste attempted to kill herself.
I
I
I almost cried when I saw that.
Yeah, and when you think about that, I mean, in a kid's game, a video game character, I mean, at the time, yeah, video games were still for kids, uh, was trying to kill herself.
That was such a. I didn't even know what to think at first. It was just, this is so sad.
Yeah, and I mean, that's a pretty big thing.
Especially considering the circumstances. Like, you can't even tell yourself that, don't do it, you have stuff to live for. You're here on your own.
Yeah, and you're here on your own. Everyone's dying. You don't know where anyone is. That's yeah.
Yeah, of
So,
course, you have the scarf shows up. You get your nice big gathering everyone together.
yeah, and you go beat the evil guy who poisoned everyone and destroyed the world. So
It is amazing they managed to make a villain like Kefka work so well.
yeah, and that it was I mean, relatively believable. Well, I mean, a psychotic clown, anyway.
Yeah, as believable as a Cyclops clown could be. But yeah. And the drop from Caine. Alrighty. Just one moment. Caine seems to have dropped.
Yep,
Oh,
I
you're
dropped.
back? Okay.
Yeah. Apparently the internet decided to poop itself.
It happens.
Yeah, so yeah, I thought Psycho Clown, good storyline. It was great. Worked out. So 6, good fun.
No, I kind of like that, not knowing what I did when I started playing, I don't think anyone foresaw Kefka being the villain.
Yeah,
He was just like the guy you would expect to beat up on your way to finally confront Gestalt.
yeah. The evil emperor. Well, we're just so used to that.
But really, Kefka worked so much better as the foil to your party than Gestalt did.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, in and of himself, he's a sort of a foil for the world of ruin and balance. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. I mean, I think anyone can agree that that 6 was, I think, probably one of the watershed moments for Final Fantasy, and it's probably what brought a lot of players into Final Fantasy who still stick around, which probably brings us into the next one.
7.
7, where everyone's like, "Oh God, what do I want to say?"
It's not bad, but it's not like, alright.
It's
If
like
I
this.
am just judging RPGs in general, Final Fantasy VII is the bare minimum of what I expect out of a game to be decent.
And here's the funny thing, and I like that we did this moment. It's like, what do we want to say?
No matter what we say, someone's gonna kill me.
Yeah, and we can do this like Final Fantasy VI, you can say anything. Final Fantasy IV, you can say anything. But Final Fantasy VII, you're just going, oh God, I better be ready for the death threats because they're going to happen. Okay, when I originally played 7, and I played it whenever it came out, we got it day one. It was a okay game. It wasn't bad. It wasn't super special. I wasn't in complete and total love with it, but I played it. What has ruined Final Fantasy VII for me is what has ruined it for many other people, which are the fans of the game.
They certainly don't help.
They are some ardent fans, and it's wonderful that people love Final Fantasy VII so much. But please stop being so cray-cray.
Okay, did you ever see the advertisements for Final Fantasy VII? Just the TV ads?
I think I did, but goodness gracious, it's been so long ago.
I remember this specifically because I couldn't believe they showed this moment. The scene where Cloud's like laying Aeris into the pool so she can sink down and die is in the freaking TV ad.
Yeah.
Like, what is wrong with you people? You've ruined what was supposed to be one of the game's biggest twists.
Yeah, and okay. So here's the deal. I didn't give a shit that she died.
I'm with you on that one.
I really did not care. Like, I cared more when Tifa got in a bitch fight.
The slap fight.
Yes, I was like, oh my gosh, Tifa, yes, go, slap the bitch. I cared more about that than I did if that Aeris died. Because, I mean, the whole thing almost sets you up for it. Like, I feel like the entire game is saying, oh, she's going to die, oh, she's going to die, oh, she's going to die, and then she dies. And it's just like, oh, well, that's new and exciting. I felt like she was going to die the entire time, and then she died, and I just wasn't saddened by it, like, at all.
I hate to hold this against the game because it's kind of more sick of the fan base doing this, but they're all, oh, it was such a big deal. This was like one of the first times they've had a character die in an RPG for good.
Nope. Mm-mm.
Not even close.
Yeah, no.
Final Fantasy II's got you beat by a country mile.
Yeah, and then you got, Porom and Palom at the time.
They came back, so I wouldn't count them, but Galuf and Tella definitely.
Well, at the time, whenever it was the original SNES, they stayed dead. No, they stayed stoned. Huh.
I'm pretty sure they came back on the airship in the SNES.
Oh, for some reason I remember that they didn't.
No, I'm pretty sure the Elder Mysidia always saves them.
Oh, okay. Well, then, Tella and Anna and Fusoya. Because I do believe he dies, doesn't he?
Oh, no, he didn't die.
Oh, for some reason I was thinking he did. Okay.
No. Because he's there with the after years. Because him and Golbez walk off at the end to stay on the moon.
Oh, okay, yeah, that's right. Well, and then, you have Sid from Final Fantasy VI. And Leo.
Well, I was referring specifically to, like, a party character.
Yeah.
Like a playable character dying, but yeah, it was not new to 7.
No, people have been dying in Final Fantasy since one of the first Final Fantasies. So, in that respect, I was just like, well, Eris died. Oh well. That's nice, dear. Like, I didn't care. I hate to be that way, but I really didn't care.
No. Like, if the character's badly written, it's so hard for me to care when they die, because they just don't feel like a person.
Yeah.
Eris was just kind of too perfect, almost.
Yeah, I just didn't care. I don't know if it was... I wasn't invested in the story, and then the Amnesia storyline happened, and I was just like, I'm done. I cannot... I couldn't care about the characters. Cloud's in a coma and whatever, and I'm going, okay.
And oh god, Sephiroth was such a dull villain.
Oh my... Mommy, I want my mommy.
Well, here's the thing, like, Sephiroth was kind of built up, like, immediately as, like, this threatening force. Like, I thought it was a really cool scene when you get into the top of Midgard Tower and you, like, find just all the blood stains on the wall, you find the dead president.
Mm-hmm.
Then, like, you're now chasing after Sephiroth, you find the Midgard Zolom, like, piked up. Like, there's no reason for him to have done that at all.
Yeah.
To pike it up like that, but you're like, oh wow, this guy's kind of intimidating. And then just nothing.
And then you meet him, and he's bitching about his mom.
Well, he's only bitching about his mom kind of in that flashback scene.
I just can't. I don't know what it was. The only character I cared about in Final Fantasy VII was Tifa.
See, I didn't like Tifa. I didn't hate her. She just kind of bored me. I like Sid.
He's a
terrible human being, yes.
Yeah.
But I could kind of get into his character. Like, I think my favorite bit was when he takes over as party leader when Cloud's out of commission.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that was my favorite run of the game right there.
Yeah.
I was so sad Cloud became party leader again.
It's like, hey, Cloud's back, and you're going, aw.
God damn it.
And Cloud was a boring character. I just did not care about the characters of Final Fantasy VII. I didn't.
See, I kind of like Barrett.
Didn't care about... I literally cared about none of them.
Yeah.
So, and I'm a character person, so...
Yeah, that is not a good game for a character.
Yeah, no, it's just like, okay, well, that's nice. I don't care.
If there's a character I really like, it's Hojo. He is a fantastic villain.
Yeah.
Until the end when he's all, I'm going to send energy to my son Sephiroth to help him. No, you're not. You're Hojo.
Yeah,
I didn't buy it.
The whole game, I didn't. Just I look back on it and I go, I don't know why people think this is so great, but I celebrate your opinion
Yeah.
and welcome it, and you're wrong. But
But
thanks
yeah,
for sharing.
that materia system though is what I was referring to when I said that was like the trend 6 started with this Esper stat boosts,
Yeah.
because your character choice doesn't matter outside of your limit breaks.
Mm-hmm.
All that really matters are the materia you have equipped.
Yeah.
Because there's so little variance from stat from one character to character. Like, I saw someone actually break down the number generators they used.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you would have a higher chance with a higher strength from Barrett, but it always kind of say cap it, so you can only be so far above the average from your natural leveling bonus stuff that
Yeah.
it doesn't really matter.
Not shocked. Not surprised at all. So 7. I mean, and I'm pretty sure, like, if I went on Twitter right now, people are like, "You're fucking wrong. I know where you live." So there's that. 8. I'm weird and I liked 8.
I hate Final Fantasy VIII so much.
I like it. I like this. I liked the story. I liked the world. I liked some. The thing I did not like was the really, really stupid. Hey, we all went to the same orphanage.
That was so dumb.
Yeah, like the rest of it, the secession of witches and fighting them, and Renoa being one, I was okay with all that. But then everybody went to the same orphanage.
You know, I almost like that just because of what kind of person it makes Irving look like. Because you have that whole scene, he's set up to snipe Idea.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. No, and freaking the way Squall gets him to finally shoot is like, don't worry, if you don't kill her, we'll make sure we get it done. Like,
Yeah.
so this is what convinces Irving to shoot a surrogate mother. And a surrogate mother, basically, is assurance she is going to die afterwards.
Yeah, and it's just, yeah.
I
The whole
hate character so much.
Yeah, that one, I think the reason I liked it so much was, I don't even know why now that I look back on it. I may need to play that one again. It's one of those to kind of go back and see what's up.
Like, I think the scene that I remember most from Final Fantasy VIII, it's after Cypher runs off with Adia. Now, ignore the fact he's obviously alive,
Yeah,
but everyone's talking about him as if he's dead.
yeah.
As stupid as that is. What gets me is during this conversation, Squall runs out of the room screaming at the thought somebody might think about him after he dies.
Yeah, I don't know. Like, I enjoyed the game, but I can't tell you why now. That's the weird part. So,
Or the
I don't.
junctioning. I hate junctioning so much. And drawing.
Yeah, I can't. I'm gonna have to play it again. Now that I think about it, it's like I can't. Why do I like that game? I don't know why, but I like it. So I'm gonna have to go back and play it and get back to you on that.
It's alright.
I like the Dia. So I like her as a character. I thought that was really kind of cool that she was, a sorceress and ass kicking and all that. That was kind of nice that the villain was a female.
Well, remember, she wasn't the villain. Ultimishu was.
Yeah, but in a way that, I mean, she was the villain, but she wasn't. I also did like, people don't like it, but I liked the time compression thing. I thought that was kind of neat. It was a difference. It was something new. And most people were like, no, I hated it.
You know, I could have ran with time compression up until the end when it's like, alright, so how are we going to battle this time compression tactic first? Well, here's what we're going to do. We're going to let her do it, and the power of our friendship will defend us.
And I didn't say it was mean. I did say.
You know, I can buy the power of friendship stuff. I mean, I watch a lot of anime in my youth. I still do. So I can buy this in the right kind of setting.
Yeah.
This was not that kind of setting.
Yeah, man, I don't know. I'm gonna have to go back and play it now that I think about it because I mean it's been a while. It's been a long time since I played 8.
There
I
is.
just
I like some of the design choices. Like the graphics are nice. There's some good art design as normal.
hmm
It's some of the worst music from Final Fantasy, but even by that standard, this is a pretty good soundtrack.
Yeah, I was kind of going. Well, that's kind of like saying you're the ugly girl in the supermodel convention. You're still
Yeah,
a supermodel,
yeah. You were still composed by Nobuo Uematsu.
Yeah,
I'm
and
probably saying that wrong, but whatever.
we'll pretend. And then we have 9. I wasn't a real fan of 9. I didn't like the cutesy. I'm
I know that turned a lot of people off, but I love 9. It just edges out 6 for me as my favorite.
Yeah, I didn't like the cutesy. And then to me, it felt like Final Fantasy VII Part 2 because it was the world energy and destroying the world, bringing it on. It just felt like and it was probably purposeful that it felt this way, but it felt like a bunch of cliches thrown together into a story.
There were some cliches here and there, but I thought any cliches they were used were well. And as far as the villains go, I actually thought they had some of the most unique motivations out of any of the Final Fantasy games. Like, you had the guy behind Kuja at first, Garland,
Mm-hmm.
who you couldn't realistically call this guy evil. He was just trying to save his people by
Yeah.
using vessels and whatnot, merging the planets. So, yes, everything he did was horrible, but at the same time, he kind of went, I can't blame you for doing this. I can't hate you.
Yeah.
But then you have Kuja, who, like, he clearly is just evil, narcissistic as all hell. But at the same point, you're kind of watching, and when you learn, like, what happens with, like, his purpose, his rebelling against Garland,
Yeah.
like, everything he's doing is to try to fight against a fate that was put upon him that he has no control over. Like, I've heard criticisms of Kuja, like, oh, he's just a child throwing a tantrum. Well, yes, that's why he's so frightening. He's so much more volatile than anyone else because of this.
Mm-hmm.
When that last moment hits and he realizes, even though he's achieved trance, he's overcome Garland's plan for him, he's still unable to escape that predetermined life that Garland imposed on him, like, just the lifespan. And
Yeah.
nothing he could do was ever going to overcome that. Mix that with his already, like, volatile emotions, the horrible narcissism.
Yeah, I can't speak much to it. Another one that's been a while since I played, but I remember when I played, I was just like, yeah, not feeling it, but it wasn't bad. I just kind of still a high quality game.
But yeah, it's Beatrix and Freya from 9.
Yeah.
I would say are like the 2 most badass women from Final Fantasy.
Yeah. I liked Beatrix. So we got 10. 11 was an MMO. 12 we already discussed.
Yeah. I did play 11. I'm not a big MMO fan. I thought this is okay.
Yeah.
I think I played for like 2 months.
Yeah, I didn't play it much because I had a life. And with Final Fantasy 11, you could not have that.
No, you cannot.
It was you play this and it is all you do ever.
I like variety in my games too much to play Final Fantasy 11.
Yeah, just couldn't do it. But if you play it, well, that's nice.
So I guess I can pretty much wipe 14 off this list of discussion too, because same thing, really.
Yeah, I mean, 14's actually a lot better, but...
Yeah. I played that one for 2 months, beat the main plot line.
Yeah. And then you start the gear treadmill.
That's quickly when I stopped playing. I'm like, nope.
Yeah. And then we have 13 in all of its incarnations.
I play... Well, technically it'd be 10-2 next, wouldn't it?
Well, I mean, 10-2 sort of is 10-2.
I can't hate it.
Yeah.
Like, well, it's a fan service game, basically. It does that well.
Yeah.
It's there you go.
I mean, I liked it. I enjoyed it, but that's because I liked 10. So, I mean, that's kind of a you're going to like the sequel because you like the original sort of moment. Um, so, I liked the dress spheres. I thought that was fun.
You know,
It was a fun game.
I swear they were trolling their audience when they thought, "Hey, you know what we should do if they get 100% completion?
Hmm
Bring Titus back."
It just,
Who wanted that?
I did. Well, I admit I cried when they brought Titus back. I can admit it because I was like, oh, but I liked that story. I just liked that, all of that. So,
If I like Titus, I think I might have liked the ending of Final Fantasy X, actually, because that was a really well done moment. Except for
yeah,
the fact I hated Titus.
yeah, that would probably do it. But yeah, I tend to. I mean, the reason I don't bring the 10-2 is because, well, it's kind of 10-2 with just Yuna. Pain was awesome.
Eh.
Pain was awesome. She kicked ass. I'm just throwing that out there. She kicked ass.
She bored me.
Well, yeah, because she was like a Lulu proxy.
She felt more like female Squall, but
I
not
can
as
see it.
annoying and infuriating.
Just female squall, but not as boring or horrible. Yeah. But I enjoyed her. I thought she was pretty cool. But yeah, she was pretty boring overall. Wasn't an exciting character by any stretch of the imagination. And then 13. 13.
Like, I think I know what they were going for with 13's battle system. Is they were kind of giving you like more of a commander type setup, where you set up your paradigm, set the strategies you were going to use, and then you change strategies rather than just directly control your party.
Mm-hmm.
Which is an interesting idea, but the strategy was so bare minimum that you really weren't doing anything. You came up with your ideas and your paradigms, and then you walked down the hallway.
So I think Final Fantasy 13 gets a lot of undue hostility. For it's a hallway simulator. Here's why I think that it is that way, so that the world could be more like the world could look more beautiful. So they sacrificed it, and I was okay with it because I don't need open world. Some people just love open world. I'm not an open world kind of person. I see an open world and I'm like, whatever, open world. I don't really much care for an open world. But others are like, I need an open world. If I don't have one, it's a shit game. So I was cool with it. I thought I liked lightning.
I hate lightning so much.
And what I think is that Final Fantasy XIII's biggest problem was localization and making characters that translate well to sort of American culture, values, etc. I think that Final Fantasy XIII's biggest problem was that it was steeped in Japanese culture, which, you bring a game over about that, or a game that's Japanese in nature to America, Americans are going to be like, no, this is horrible, please take it back, sir. But I did like Lightning. I thought she was a very interesting character. Very sort of a strong woman character that at the same time had her vulnerabilities that you really take a while to learn that she actually has them, because her vulnerabilities are you really don't actually learn them until 13 Lightning Returns. So it takes a little bit. Yeah.
She just did not seem like stable at all. But I don't think they realized how she was unstable. You're going along her little story with Hope, and you're at the Falsey headquarters.
Yeah.
And she's all, I'm not here to cause problems for everyone. I'm just gonna kill the l'Cie. Well, what's gonna happen when you kill the l'Cie or this l'Cie? It's gonna screw up everyone's food supply for life.
Yeah.
Okay. And I don't know if the writers realized how crazy this sounded.
Well, and it's 13. It's just because it's such a. It tried to be its own world. Um, the reason she was doing that was at that time she'd pretty much had her fill of the fal'Cie, because the fal'Cie she felt were controlling destiny, and so as a result, for humans to be able to define their own destiny, well, you've got to get underneath the fal'Cie. But I think that, like I said, it loses its way in translation because you know it just seems like crazy terrorism at a time where America's a little on edge about that. So I just think it steeped itself, like I said, too much in Japanese and not enough in American, and that's where some of the problems came.
I don't know. I think like with a lot of the characters, I don't know if this is a localization issue or if this is just how they were. Like
Hmm.
for me, I see Lightning. She It looks to me like they mixed up making a strong female character with making her just kind of a bitch. She just seems to have a problem with anything and everything happening, no matter what it is.
Yeah, and like I said, in 13 they actually explain whenever she went and became a soldier at Guardian, she sort of cut off that innocent, sweet part of her and just made herself nothing but a bitch. And she did that on purpose so that she could survive. But that probably would have been a great character development moment that you could have had in your main game, not in 3 games later that you sort of throw in at the very end.
Yeah.
So I think that, and this is what I say, I think that 13, 2, 3, all of the 13 series, I think it was they had an idea for 13 and people responded poorly to that idea. Um, so then they tried to go back and they tried to fix it and say, okay, you didn't like this, so we're going to change this and this and this and this. But they lost the storyline. So 13.2 was sort of a departure, I think, from their original intent. And then 13.3, because people responded so poorly to 13.2, the ending in particular, Sarah dying, that they went, okay, then we're just going to do this again. And it felt like what was supposed to be one game in 3 games. And the story should have been one game, but it just took them forever to get to it because they were busy, saying, oops, we didn't mean this, oops, we didn't mean this, and just making flub ups.
That's also like I didn't play 13.2 or Lightning Returns.
Hmm.
I'd had my fill with that beating 13.
Yeah.
Like I think the only character I could really get behind was Saz,
Yeah.
which is weird because he felt like the most realistic character in the game, yet he had a chocobo living in his hair.
Hey, don't knock the Frocobo.
It's awesome, don't get me wrong, but
The Frocobo was the best thing in the world.
it's
But
adorable.
yeah, and that's really, I think, where 13.2 lost itself, was it was trying to create a whole new mythos behind Final Fantasy, the Nova Crystallis, et cetera, Fabula Nova Crystallis, or something like that. It was trying. Well, it tried to create this new entire background for Final Fantasy, but in the process, it lost the details of Final Fantasy. It lost the richness of what's supposed to be the series. I think 15 is going to be. Yeah, 15. I think 15 is going to be really good. I also am really stoked that it's not going to be a story that's female driven. It's going to be a story that's male driven, and it's about male relationships and male friendships. I think that's so cool because that's something that video games sometimes don't explore. They just explore men as kicking ass and taking names. So it'll be kind of neat for it to explore, how men interact and friendships and whatnot, even though it's under fire because goodness forbid you have a video game with males.
The only thing I've been hearing about is there's boobs on Sid now. Meh.
Oh, shut up. That's all I gotta say about that.
No.
Just no, just be quiet. Just shh, shh. But yeah, I think in all, Final Fantasy is a really great series of games. Very great storytelling, great music. I think Final Fantasy as a series gets more shit than it deserves. I think that uh, if you look at if you step away from the Final Fantasy series and you go play one of these really crappy RPGs out there, and then you come back to Final Fantasy, you're like, wow, this is a lot better than it actually is a good series and good game. Sometimes you got to remind ourselves of that.
Like Paladin's Quest.
Yeah, see, I feel weird. I haven't played a lot of games lately because of work and school and all that other fun stuff, just getting everything in line in my life. But yeah. It's a good series. Good series.
Paladin's Quest is a game that came out like back on the Super Nintendo.
Yeah.
There is a sequel to it apparently that is awesome, but no one stateside knows about it unless you like get the fan translation games. Because the first game is beyond terrible. Like it looks like a midlife NES title.
Yeah. I'm not going to say anything.
The story is bad even by like crappy non-FF RPG standards.
But is it on Greenlight? No, I'm sorry.
That would be so awesome. I would greenlight that.
Yeah,
let other people suffer through it.
Yeah, I definitely think. Like I said, Final Fantasy good series, other good series, the Chrono series. I actually liked Cross.
I still prefer Trigger, but I think Cross gets a lot of shit that shouldn't be flung at it.
Yeah, and well, that's easy because it's not Trigger. It didn't.
That's a hard thing to live up to.
Yeah, I just think, people. You enjoy your video games, so to speak. So, there we go. We went through every Final Fantasy.
Wait, no, we're missing Mystic Quest.
Well, we're missing a whole bunch if we start going into all the side games. I mean,
I like Mystic Quest.
Yeah, it was a good game for its time.
No, it wasn't.
It was because it was just a very basic introduction to Final Fantasy.
It could kind of work like that. But just no. I don't. It's not good. Like, I love how the enemy sprites changed as you damaged them. That was awesome.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sad more games didn't do that.
Yeah.
No. The story was just not there. The combat was so basic.
But and it was supposed to be, that game was supposed to just be a very harsh introduction to Final Fantasy. So I'd kind of judge it on those merits. That it was just, it was supposed to get people into the series. I don't know if it did that though. So
I don't know, I mentioned this earlier, but like the local video shop where I lived had that awesome rental section. Like amongst Final Fantasy Mystic Quest being on the list, these were the other titles available. And again, this is like a small town in the middle of nowhere. I had Breath of Fire 2, Chrono Trigger, Earthbound, Ogre Battle March of the Black Queen, Lufia 2 Rise of the Sinistrals.
Yeah, I mean, those are some classic titles.
But amongst all of this, there's just Final Fantasy Mystic Quest sitting there, which I didn't know about the NES Final Fantasy at the time, so I thought Mystic Quest was the first Final Fantasy.
Yeah, no.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, like I said, the entire point of that game was supposed to be to introduce people to the series, but yeah, I don't know if it quite did that, especially not when you had better games out there at that time.
Indeed.
I think that kind of sounds like we've about hit all we need to hit.
Indeed. Every Final Fantasy covered outside of weird spin-offs. Well, I guess I could leave Tactics. That's actually a really good one.
Tactics. Again, that's another one of the end. Tactics.
Yeah.
Good game. So there we go. Yay. Good job, everybody.
Excellent then. Well, thank you for coming on.
No problem. Thank you for having me.
Dude, I've technically broken every rule of my show today. Like, it's supposed to only be games I've reviewed, so I can get like a counterpoint to my views on these games. And
Instead, we just talked.
and, and technically was trying to only bring in like bloggers, let's players, reviewers, critics, and whatnot, which you really don't do now, as far as I've seen.
I'm none of those things.
Yeah.
So I just exist.
I've pretty much thrown out the rules of this show for every single episode so far.
I think it's best just to have something that's conversation, just people talking.
I still think I'll like try to get people in with opposed views to my reviews because that was kind of the point of this to begin with.
Yeah, but in the end, it's like, well, I'm not a disagreeable person. You need to find disagreeable people.
I don't know. Assuming FF10 had actually come out recently, I figured this would be a good enough pro-con view on it.
Yeah, just y'all go play it, decide for yourself. How about that? Well, and with that, thank you for having me. Y'all have a good day, viewers.
I think we've only actually had the one viewer so far.
Oh, good day, viewer.
I'm sorry you came in so late.